You're teaching this year
Alright.
in school. Okay.
So I'm teaching something actually a little bit different. I'm actually teaching fourth grade. Yeah, I've got other things to do, but like the little teaching portfolio, I'm teaching fourth grade Chumash.
It's really terrific.
Yeah.
I see for my grandkids, that is one of the most impressionable years you could
Right,
have.
correct. And also there's time when they need to learn the skills, to learn.
Right.
So once they get a little bit older, it's harder to teach them, or for them to have the patience to learn how to learn.
And not only that, but when they have a really inspiring teacher, makes a difference for the rest of their academic life.
That's
It
hope.
really does.
Yeah.
You're studying from teenager?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, the truth is I got here a little earlier than I usually do. But yeah, he was sleeping. Yeah, he woke up last night in the middle of the night. He had a nosebleed. He gets nosebleeds a lot, so he had a nosebleed in the middle of the night. So I feel like what happens with his sleep cycle is that he ends up sleeping later in the days when he wakes up in the middle of the night. So he was sleeping when I left.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I need something warm, but I don't. There's no.
Is there?
No. I
Usually
didn't.
every time I'm the same trip. And you can catch it on YouTube afterwards. I just think get some water when he goes sleeping. When you had that down?
Trying to get there for at least a couple of days in September. It really depends on James' work schedule.
Okay.
He's lately been having a lot of
Oh,
hearings that they
jeez.
went live, by Zoom. They were kind of stuck there, but he said he thinks one of the cases for September settled.
If you have.
Yes.
Otherwise, I know if
I started my answer preparation. I don't wanna run into a problem.
You're right, there's no hot water.
Actually, I always bring it with me, because I never know if I'm gonna be here next week. or-
Yeah, I usually bring like big one.
What?
Complain with Jason Newman's hot water.
I rarely want it, it's just, it's this morning. I'm just-
We do have leftover one.
The last thing I actually had this morning. I'm gonna have calories in the morning, I'll have cold pizza.
Whole pizza.
That sounds so appetizing. Coffee, halacha.
Maybe that's why I'm drinking it this morning, whatever.
Drop any of your outside. You got me the pace that I could follow. Oh, shit.
Many choices. Okay, we are Reish. Good morning to everybody. Reish Lamechet, and we left off in the middle of Siv Vav. So let's just reread Siv Vav, and then we're going to take a look at a couple of comments from the Be'er Halacha. So Siv Vav in Reish Lamechet says, "Hato b'tfilas Shabbos v'hechliv zo v'zo." If you make a mistake, you say Shachar at Mincha, and you say Mincha at Mariv. You know, the middle section, the middle part of the Shabbos Shemona Esrei, you switch the time of the day. Ein chozer. You don't go back. At the end of the day, they're all discussing the holiness and the sanctity of Shabbos. So if you by mistake at Mariv, I don't know, your brain took off and started saying the Shachar, you started saying Yismach Moshe Mat Naschelko, and then you finished the whole bracha, and you're like, oops, it's nighttime. I don't know why I was saying the Shacharis bracha. So, nonetheless, don't worry. Eino chozer, you don't need to go back and repeat it. At the end of the day, you said, you know, the key paragraph is Resevim Nuchasenu, okay, and that's in every one of the three Amida, Amidas of the Shabbos day. So you're good. Now, next part. The Yesh Omrim, there are those that say, Shim Hechlif Shel Musaf B'Acheres, Acheres B'Shel Musaf, those there. There are those that say that if you switch Musaf for another tefillah, so you say Musaf, at a different time. Sorry, Musaf B'Acheres, there was Tezayin, right? So you start saying Yishmach Moshe instead of Tikanta Shabbos, right? So it's most of time, and you start saying Shachos, even though you already said Shachos. I don't know. Someone's sleeping at the wheel and what page they were on. Or Acheres B'Shal Musaf. You start instead of at Shachos, this maybe more realistic, I don't know. But at Shachos, somebody starts saying Musaf. Whatever, they were on the wrong page, they got confused, I don't know. And so what do you do in that situation? So this opinion says, Choser, you do go back. You do go back because this Musaf is a very different nature tefillah. Okay, the whole reason of Musaf is because you have to mention Musaf, and the regular Amida of Shabbos, whether it's Ma'ariv, Shachos, Mincha, doesn't talk about a korban. Doesn't. It's not talking about a korban Musaf.
So at what point do you stop?
So you should, as soon as you catch. Meaning, when do you stop? As soon as you catch yourself. Meaning, as soon as you catch yourself, if you're saying it's really most of time, and you're saying Yismach Moshe, and you're going, okay, wherever you catch yourself, you stop and you go back to the beginning of the middle bracha of Tikanta Shabbos, or Tzitza Karban Oseh.
I mean, that's very nice. The more common mistake is on Rosh Chodesh. Shabbos Rosh Chodesh. When you say Musaf,
You don't say Atayat Tzarta.
You start saying the regular. Oh, wait a minute.
Right. So yes, if you catch yourself in the middle, you should start the correct one. If you don't, you have to go back to you should go back to the beginning of it. Meaning, like, let's say you're in Ritei or Modim already, and you realize I didn't, so you should go back, because if you didn't make any mention of Rosh Chodesh, even if you get one in there, let's say you're at the very end, you're at the chasim of the bracha, you say Baruch Ata Hashem Mekadesh Shabbat, and then you realize, wait, it's also Rosh Chodesh, or then and you add in V'Roshei Chodashim or something like that. You mention Rosh Chodesh somewhere, then you're good. But if you don't mention Rosh Chodesh at all, then you miss, because historically speaking, they would have brought a separate Korban Musaf for Rosh Chodesh aside from Shabbos. You have to get at least a mention of Rosh Chodesh in there to be Yotzei.
You start from the beginning.
Well, you would go if you're still in the middle. If you haven't taken your 3 steps, if you haven't taken any steps back, you go back to Atayat Tzarta, and if you finish, you have to do it again. Yeah. So he is a year. Yeah, Simeon. Good morning. Yes.
Good morning, Rav. Rav, was the korban for a musaf on Yom Tov different than the actual korban itself for Shabbos?
In terms of what kind of animal was brought?
What kind of animal, and what was different? Before we learned by Shachris Eino Choser, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so here you say we do Choser. And
if I say Shachris during Musaf, or I say Musaf during Shachris, yes, there the answer is there. The psak is Choser. Yeah.
And so I was wondering if we are holding, and not all of the Rishonim held this way, but if we are holding that the tefillah is in lieu of the korban, I'm wondering if the korban itself was uniquely different between Shabbos or Yom Tov.
So the answer is yes. In fact, what's the source? Is the Torah itself, and those psukim are in the Amida of Musaf of Yom Tov. That's why, if you ever notice, that there are different insertions depending on what day of Yom Tov it is. On Pesach, it's the first 2 days of Pesach. It says, or something like that, and it tells you what, how many kvasim and how many parim, and then on Sukkot, that it changes literally every day. There's a different, mixture of animals that are brought as korbanos, and so yes, they are distinctly different than what you do on Shabbos. What do we do on Shabbos? Right? So it's all actually. So the answer to this question is actually always in the text of the Musaf. We actually usually mention how many of each of the korbanos are brought. Okay. Very good. So take a look. So we read last time, because I went back to the recording just to make sure where we ended. So we ended with reading Tes Zion last time in the Mishnah Berurah, and he talked about that. If you start saying again, Yismach Moshe in place of Musaf, and you don't mention the Musaf at all, then you should go back to the beginning of the middle section of Musaf, or if you've taken your 3 steps back, then you have to go, you have to go back all the way. And he quoted at the end, the Chai Adam said, if you remember in between Mikadesh HaShabbos and say, you could slip in a V'nasa lefanecha korban musaf. You slip in a little line about the korban musaf, and you can get away with it because there's mentioning a musaf that is still at least somewhat tied to the middle bracha of the Amida. That is, again, a very narrow case. You have to catch yourself in a particular spot. And then he says, go take a look at the Be'er Halacha. So let's take a look at the Be'er Halacha on the left-hand side of the page. In my edition, it's the second line down of the Be'er Halacha, Musaf Be'acheres. So he writes here, I'm a Mishnah Berurah, that if you haven't taken your 3 steps back, you go back to Tikanta Shabbos. In the Derech HaChaim, he writes, the Chol Heichli Niskar Be'emsa Eitz Bracha Migimel Acharonos Choser L'Tikanta Shabbos. That which is consistent that if you're in the middle of any of the 3 latter brachos, then you go back to Tikanta Shabbos. Uvechai Adam Klal Kavches Mitzari Lomar, and the Chai Adam writes, the Chol Heichi Shitav Lo Hizkir Shal Musa Pekadusha Sayom Azay Yomar Ba'avoda Yomar V'Hashev Avoda Yomar V'Nasel V'Necha B'Tzmi B'Smi Yom V'Korban Musaf Ayin Shamta. He throws in here that it's not just if you forget in the middle bracha. If you remember, you remember during Ritzei that I just said the wrong middle bracha. I just said Shachar during Musaf. You can still add in a line in the bracha of that we shall establish before you the Tzmidei Yom, the twice daily offering, and the Korban Musaf, and that's enough of a mention to get away with it. B'di Eved, that you don't have to repeat the Midah or go back even at the Tikanta Shabbos. That's okay. So so you have another out here if you make a mistake. Yeah.
So, my question: are these contemporaneous writings? Because the
Be'er Halacha and Mishnah Berurah.
right, because one is referring.
So they're both.
First the Be'er Halacha and the Be'er Halacha.
Yeah. So the trick is that they're written by the same person. Chafetz Chaim wrote both. and that's why he says, by the way, I think it's so interesting. He uses the royal we here. His last line of the Mishnah Berurah was "V'ayim Be'er Halacha Mashe Kasavdim." Right? Really, he should say Mashe Kasavti. Right? But he wrote both, and so this was when he wanted to go into more. He wanted to give you more bei'ur. He wanted to give you more depth about some topic. Sometimes you look at the Be'er Halacha and the comments can go on for a page or two, because they'll give you the whole sugya with the Rishonim and whatever. There are different opinions about this psak halacha and that psak halacha, so that's he'll often. That's why they'll reference each other because he wrote both. Yeah, trick. It's a trick. Yeah, it's a trick. Yeah, Simeon, go ahead.
Rav, it's worth noting that the Chafetz Chaim was a late 19th, early 20th century man. So yeah. He's relatively for such a positive source for halachot. He's much more in tune with what we are today than a lot of the Rishonim were.
No, 100%. We always say Hilchot Shabbat that we passed in like the later authorities. It's an interesting sugya. But what do you say? Yeah, it's 100 years ago. This is and the interesting academic question, which I think sometimes I see references here. The Aruch HaShulchan. Did the Aruch HaShulchan know about the Mishnah Berurah is writing the Mishnah Berurah? Aruch HaShulchan. I think Aruch HaShulchan had a copy of the Mishnah Berurah, if I'm not mistaken, because he occasionally, very rarely, he makes a reference to it. So he was aware of something that had emerged, I guess, from Radin. But that's an interesting academic question, and they often make reference to the very same works, to the Magen Avraham, to the Taz, to the the Chaya. They were aware of a lot of this, the same work. Yeah, it's an important work. This Mishnah Berurah. Okay, Let's go back to the Mishnah Berurah now. Sifkat on Zion. What if I make a mistake and during Shachris I say Musaf? Okay, seems unlikely, but you got somebody who's maybe newer to to an Orthodox synagogue, and they're used to coming in Musaf. They know they're Musaf. They come a little later. One time they come earlier. They see the davening Shema Esrei. They might make whatever they make a mistake. Hainu she'amar Yud Zayin. Hainu she'amar hanusach tikanta Shabbos. The kavanos lo hayis l'shem Shachris. They're starting to say tikanta Shabbos, but they had in mind I'm davening Shachris. Vav she'izker ba'abracha min Shabbos. Even though yes, I mean tikanta Shabbos does talk about Shabbos, so you are getting that mention of Shabbos in there. Afal pikein choser. Even so, you go back. David she'amar Musaf toch tfilasav v'shikei lifnei hamakom. Because you're talking about the Korban Musaf and bringing the Korban Musaf, and that's like you're lying. It's lying in your words. You're not commemorating the Korban Musaf right now. This is not. It's false. This is not what this is about. Therefore, you go back. If you are Shiker B'Dvarav, you're supposed to go back. There are other examples of this we'll get to in a moment. Going to Tfilos when we're Shiker B'Dvarav, when our words are actually not lined up with sort of the truth. Dino Gamkein Kidleil, so the halacha is like it was earlier. The Imalka Raglav. I've already taken my steps back. I've uprooted my legs. Choser Larosh and Mispalal Tefillah Acheres. I should go back to the beginning of the whole Shemona Esrei together and daven again. Kahogen L'Shem Shachris, and this time I should daven the correct way with the Shachris in mind. Musaf. But here's an interesting halacha though. This is one of those if you end up on a game show. From game show, and they asked you if you say Musaf by accident in Shachris, and you have to repeat Shachris. Of course, that's the halacha. Now, what do I do with Musaf? And the answer is, you don't have to say Musaf anymore. You said Musaf, and so he says here about Shal Musaf lo yisfallah. You don't have to have Musaf anymore. You daven Musaf now, and this amount of Musaf, so you get that works. The Niskar Kodem should now. But of course, that calls for an interesting question, which we'll talk about in a second. I mean, it worked. It was the Musaf, where the words were correct, the timing was correct. You're good for Musaf, even though your kavanah was for Shachris. What if you remember though, before you take 3 steps back? You're in the middle of Sim Shalom, and now I take 3 steps back. Before I take 3 steps back, I remember. So we mean even if you're in the last 3 brachos, you're in the middle of Sim Shalom. So you stop right there and you go back to Yismach Moshe. Now, here comes a trivia question. Does my Yamida count for Musaf? Do I have to daven Musaf later when Kehila gets to Musaf? Or no, I think. Yeah, you would have to daven again. Correct, because you didn't finish, and then you went back to start the middle section again. It is like you erased what you did, right? And you're going back to the beginning of the middle of bracha, and therefore you are not Yotzei Musaf at that point. You would need to daven you have to daven Musaf when it gets to Musaf. But if you finish the whole thing and you take 3 steps back, that does register as a Musaf. Okay, so that's. If anybody ever asks the person next to you daven the wrong Amida, I don't know what to do. Don't worry, I'll tell you what to do. Because now you know this very rare halacha that will probably never come up in your life. Okay. And at the end here it says, "I'm Be'er halacha." He once again sends us to the Be'er halacha. This is an interesting comment to the Be'er halacha. So look at the next Be'er halacha from where we left off last time. Acheres b'shel Musa. He says, "I am Mishnah Ramashik Atzavnu." Again, he's the royal we here. What we wrote. That if you remember before you take your steps back, before you uproot your legs, then you should go back and you should start with Yismach Moshe. Obviously you should go back from the place where you made the mistake. The mistake started with Yismach Moshe, where you were supposed to Yismach Moshe and you said Tikanta Shabbos. He says, and I saw in the Derech HaChaim, supposing that Filim Diskar Be'emsa Tfilas Musaf, the Choser LaRosh HaTfila. that it could be in the middle of the Musaf. I assume he means in the middle section. And he says, if you remember, in the middle of the Musaf, the middle section, you should go back to the beginning of the Amidah, not to the beginning of the bracha, but to the beginning of Amidah. And he says,
So Rav,
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah does not mean to go back to Avos.
yes, it means back to Avos. Yeah, yes, we're going all the way back to the beginning according to Derech HaChaim. I'm not going to pass it like this, so we'll take you. So don't worry, don't take this one to the bank. But the Mishnah Berurah here, sorry, the parallel there, halacha, same person, says Upelahu. Says this is a wonder. What a psak! I've never heard this. Is a very strange psak. The halachos of Lael, he writes earlier, Eitzel Dine Ya'alev Yavo, when it comes to the halachos of Ya'alev Yavo. The Amar Davar Shu Sheker Muchla Be'emsa Tefila. He mentions over there the halachos of Ya'alev Yavo, that if somebody lies in the middle of, they say something that's not the truth, it's a fib in the middle of tefillah. For example, you say Ya'alev Yavo, and your mouth takes over, and you said Rosh Chodesh instead of it was really Chol Hamoed. And if you didn't say Chag HaMatzos or Chag HaSukkos, you said Rosh Chodesh. And then you kept going like, ooh, oops. Or I added something that I wasn't supposed to. I said Mashiv Aruch Morid Ageshem, and I wasn't supposed to say Mashiv Aruch Morid Ageshem. Or I said something that I wasn't supposed to say, the extra. It's a lie. It's not true. It's not the time of the year for whatever. So the halacha, Der Chaim himself writes that he treats it like dinu kesach. It's like speaking in the middle of the Amidah. And if you ever talk in the middle of the Amidah, which you might, it's not something that you really should do, obviously. But there are, exterior circumstances. You can have a child, or your child is beside themselves, and because of decorum in the shul. It's not one thing that they're talking a little bit, but they're crying, they're wailing, whatever. It's not unheard. It's not unheard of that you actually stop your Shemona Esrei where you are. You take your child out. You deal with them in whatever way you have to deal with them, and you come back. And what do you do if it's not such a huge break? The halachas on this. Well, if it's not such a huge break, you come back in. Where do you start from? You go back to the beginning of the bracha that you were working on. Okay, you go back to your position of Amidah and you continue, but you go back to the beginning of that bracha. So the same thing here, Dinu Kesach. It's like talking. It's like talking in the middle of your bracha. V'chozel leRosh HaBracha. You should go back to the beginning of that bracha. Oh, but Gimel Achronos. If you ever make a mistake or have something go wrong in the last three brachos, let's say you're in the middle of Sim Shalom, and you realize that in Modim you didn't. I don't know. If you forget Al Anithim, you don't go back. Right, you realize you didn't say Ya'alev Yavo, but you have to go back to Ritzay because Ya'alev Yavo was in Ritzay. Let's say there's a mistake made. Somebody says the wrong something in not Al Anisim because you don't go back for Al Anisim, but you made a mistake in Sim Shalom or whatever. The last three are grouping. If there's ever a mistake in the last three, you go back to Ritzay. If you realize in the middle of Sim Shalom I made a mistake in the Modim, you don't go back to Modim, you go back to Ritzay. So he says here that you go back to the beginning of the bracha generally. There must have been a scribal error in the Derech HaChaim's words because that would contradict the Derech HaChaim's principle that he wrote in the other area, which is how we paskin, by the way. We do paskin like that. That if you make a mistake, you speak, or you make a mistake, you go back to that bracha. But his psak that you go back to the beginning of the Amidah on Shabbos if you make a mistake with the Shachris and the Musaf thing, he says that must be a scribal error that doesn't make any sense. Somebody copied it wrong. Okay. Let's take a look now at that ends our Sif Katan, Sif Vav. Let's take a look now at up on top, Sif Zion. This gets interesting. This gets fun. Maybe we're all going to learn something we didn't know. So after the Amidah on Friday night, I'm not reading the words here yet. You know what happened on Friday night? We finished the Amidah. We continue with Vayechulu. Now, why do we say Vayachulu? If you looked ahead, then it's cheating. So, well, from your knowledge of your life before this and before today, why do we say Vayachulu? I don't know. It's Shabbos. We say Vayachulu because it says in the Siddur, right? Okay. And if you're read at the bottom, it's, you're testifying to Hashem creating the world. That's why you have to say it loud, be in unison. Okay. Some truth to that. Take a look here. Sif Ches. Sif Zayin. Chozrim lomar Vayachulu. We go back and we say Vayachulu. Why are we using the word Chozrim here? Why Chozrim? Okay, if you but let's assume you didn't skip it. It was in the Friday night Amida. Vayachulu is in the middle. Is in the good. Why Chozrim? Because you're repeating it here. So we repeat Vayachulu after Amida. Why? And this is the reason we say it every Friday night. Chozrim lo Vayachulu mishum yom tov shechal yos b'Shabbos shein omrim osa b'tefillah. Okay. If Friday night turns out to be a yontif, and you say the yontif Shmon Esrei, you don't say Vayachulu. It's not in the Nusach. Therefore, we say every Friday night Vayachulu ought to, because the Shabbos that falls out twice a year, that it's a yontif, and there's no Vayachulu in the Shmon Esrei. That's why we say Vayachulu on Friday night. Okay? You didn't know that until now. Now you know.
But
You're like, wait, I never knew that. What?
But Rob, isn't that a needless repetition? Aren't we saying it for no reason?
But Simeon, we do this all the time in Judaism, and you hit halacha. Think of another time when we say something once, or we do something once. Sorry, we really have to only do it once, but we do it multiple times. Watch. You guys ready for an example? Why do we wash our hands before we eat bread? Anybody know why we wash? Heals the diet. Okay, so the answer the Gemara says is Mishum Strach Truma. Because the Kohanim, when they would eat, they had to make sure that they were in a state of ritual purity because they might eat Truma. So they would wash as almost a way of removing the Tumas Yadayim, the second degree level of impurity, because Taim Yadayim are Shniyas Latuma. So wait a minute. Okay, I understand why I have to wash. I'm a Kohen. I have to be careful. Why do you have to wash, Simeon? You're not a Kohen.
My hands are dirty.
Yeah. The reason is you all have to wash because you have to help me. So the Kohanim remember that they have to be in a state of ritual purity when they eat their truma. So we often do things that are unnecessary to help one situation. It's actually, I can go through a few other examples in halacha where we do something, there's one scenario and for when it's applicable, but we do it in other scenarios so that we habitualize ourselves so that we don't miss it the one time we need it. Okay? By the way, tongue in cheek, he won't want me to say this, so I won't say that. There was a teacher I had who said that the Jewish community loves to drink a lot all year long. Why? Ought to, that on Purim they don't miss out and they fulfill the halacha of being drunk. So that's where Kiddush Club comes from. That's where all they don't want to miss drinking on Purim. They're very frum like that. Anyways, so there's the same kind of halacha here. It's really Yom Tov Shechal Yos B'Shabbos happens. I mean, last year it happened 3 times in a row, or 3 out of 4 weeks in the fall. It happens maximally 3-4 times a year. So that's why we do that. That's why we have Vayachulu. And he says, V'gam lahotzi mi she'eino yodea. There are people who used to come to shul, and they didn't know how to daven. And at Mariv, there's no Chazoras Hashatz. So they didn't say Vayachulu. So for those people, this way they were Yotzei Vayachulu. Vayachulu is a very important way to acknowledge that it's Shabbos and use the words of the Torah of the 7th day of creation to, with our words, sanctify the day of Shabbos. So it's also for those people as well. We say it out loud and we say it standing. Now, the second part of this becomes why people sometimes associate Vayachulu on Friday nights. But let's go down to the Mishnah Berurah. He's going to give us all the context we need. Sif Katan Yurches. She'ein omrim also. Okay, so here we go. That you because we don't say it in the tefillah of Friday night on the holiday. Va'agav Shabbos zeh, and because of that Shabbos, the Shabbos that falls out on Yom Tov, tiknu l'chol Shabbos. The rabbis decreed it should be on every Shabbos. Okay, so halacha that goes all the way back to Tosfos. Yeah. Yes. Correct. Yes. Correct. We don't have any kind of repetition of Marv. Yeah. Or Yom Tov. By the way. Yeah, excellent. We're gonna get to that in Sif Ches. Sorry, Sif Ches Test and you. We're gonna talk about the Bracha Meishem.
Yeah, right.
And there's a special reason for that. We'll get to it in a moment. Yeah.
So the fact that this is kind of like a those and shots, he doesn't mention it.
Yeah.
This is only because
It's a chazar because we want the people who couldn't daven.
But there are 1 or 2 Shabbos during the year when you have to coincides. We do it every Friday.
Right.
It has nothing to do with chazar.
Correct. Not chazar shots. It's its own thing. Exactly.
But we have the other brachas that we do in the shul.
Yeah. That's
very similar to the
yes, and we'll get there in just a moment. Yes, and we're going to talk about why that's there. Yeah, it's an interesting
But
halacha.
it has nothing to do with chazar.
Right. Correct.
It
has- Yeah, it's nothing. You'll see. It has nothing. I don't want to get. I don't spoil why we do it. It's very exciting.
You say by Hulu in
Yes.
then you say it after the
Yes.
the agents, right? So sampling and out loud.
Well, that's what we're about to do right now. We're going to say that once we're doing this, we do it as in a form of edus of the bearing witness.
And
Yeah.
then you repeat it again.
Yes.
So you have 3 shots at it.
Yes. There is actually. I saw yesterday. I was actually preparing that there's a medrash in the Rokeach. The Rokeach mentions a medrash that you're supposed to say by Chul 3 times on Friday night.
Right.
Once in the Amida, once afterwards, and once at Kiddush. I don't know why. I don't know if there's a medrash. Do you have the medrash there? I always thought that there's a mention of there is such a medrash. I couldn't find where the medrash is though. Yeah, you have it? It says what word? Asher. Okay, so it says Asher 3 times. Para Duma, yeah. I have to give Drush on that one time because that's got to say that needs some more deeper explanation because that seems a little. That's like okay, so the 3 times of Asher in Vayachulu and the 3 times of Asher in the Parsha of the Para Aduma teaches you that if you say Vayachulu 3 times, that you end up with Kapara like you have a Para Aduma. Wow, that's fascinating. What a medrash. Yeah.
By the way, I have to say I really enjoyed the davening this morning. I had enough time to daven.
Yeah.
Because I don't daven so far.
I said all the words. I went as fast as I could go.
Friday night, I can never finish the Amida before everybody says Vayachulu.
Usually I'm in the same boat.
Yeah, so I know some people, if they miss Vayachulu, they pull somebody.
Oh, we're going to talk about it.
We're going to talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to talk about it. It's very exciting. It's halachas that come every week now.
Right, so if he would daven Friday night, then I'd have a chance.
Yeah. You should know the year when I was davening all them frequently because I was an Avel. I was the slowest davener because I can only daven at a certain pace, and people at times got impatient with me. I was trying my best, So I ended up davening Marav a lot. Thank you. Anyways, yes. Yeah. Correct. You're going back and you're saying it again. The idea is that you said it in the Amida, and now you're going back and you're saying it a second time. Now, let's read your test. You're supposed to say it standing. Why are you supposed to insist that it has to be standing? You say it's standing on 1 foot. I can stay sitting down. Why does it matter? He says here, Because when we say the words of Vayachulu, what we are doing is testifying to the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. And V'din Eidim Ba'amida. The halacha is that when witnesses, unlike the American court system, in the American court system, I was only a witness once in something, and I sat there and I had to raise my hand and I tell the truth, whatever. But I sat and she said, "This is the chair. Sit." In halacha, you stand. Din Eidim Ba'amida. Witnesses stand. Get them uncomfortable. Okay.
Rav,
Yeah.
Rav, don't we stand by Hataras Nedarim before?
Yes, I think of course because
It's Eidus, and the three people constitute a Beit
well,
Din.
I don't know if it's Eidus, but there you're almost like you're coming in front of the Beis Din. When you're in front of the Beis Din, you're supposed to stand in front of the Beis Din. The Beis Din is sitting, and anyone who comes in front of the Beis Din is supposed to be standing.
Okay.
Right? Anyways, it says Amdu Shnei Ha'anashim. What's the source on that? Steve, do you have a pasuk there that source set for that one? Okay, that's what this next week's parsha. Yeah, okay, next week's parsha. That the Amdu Shnei Ha'anashim, that the two men stood. So the idea here is that witnesses in halacha that have to stand. So therefore, we stand when we say Vayachulu because it's bearing witness to God creating the earth, creating the world. Excuse me. V'tov lomar osa b'yachad b'tzibur, and it's good to say it together with the tzibur, with the community. The eda shlema ba'ina lahayida al kadosh baruch hu. To have a complete, you need the entire community to bear witness to Kadosh Baruch Hu. I'll call upon him, and if nevertheless, if some guys are taking too long with their Shemon Esrei, so yeah, b'shnayim, it should be at least with two. Why two? Because that's the minimum for Eidus, right? You need two witnesses for something as a matter of testimony. The Yochid HaMispal. What about a Yochid who davens on Friday night by themselves? This goes to your question, Richie. You miss Vaychulu because you weren't fast enough. You don't need to go back and say Vaychulu. The Ein Eidos LiYochid. There's no Eidos for an individual. The Yochid Lo Yochol Lomar. No, a Yochid absolutely can say it. But you don't need to stand at that point. There's no need for the witness piece. But why do you need to say it? Trevor, why do you need to say it? This is everyone always forgets.
To routinize.
That's right. Because we need to make sure that every week we say it, so that the week that we don't say Vayachulu in the Amida, we say Vayachulu afterwards. And therefore, it doesn't matter if you're davening by yourself at home or you missed it, and there's no one, whatever, you're not clapping somebody. I'm not even sure you necessarily have to. It's a machlokas where you have to pull somebody in like that. But you should say Vayachulu, but you have to say Vayachulu because that's the halacha, irrespective of the whole Eidus topic. And therefore, you have to say it every week according to this opinion. In fact, whereas I lost my spot now, I looked up. Right here, he says, "V'tov shegam hayochid oyomar." It's good for the individual said, "Avalo yiskaven l'shem edus to look at Korban Torah." You don't have to have any witnessing, witness testimony in mind. You could just be like, "I'm reading Psukim here." Koslav Matei Moshe, the Matei Moshe writes, "Yimshachach lo arbei sakneses." Let's say you forget to say when shul yomar osla b'shebekiddush me'umar. You should say it standing when you're Kiddush. Machlokas, we'll get to it when we get to it. What position should you be when you say Kiddush? Standing, sitting, a mix of standing and then sitting. But if you missed it in shul, then you should say it at home at the beginning of Kiddush, standing. Which probably already tells you now you start to understand why do I say Vaychu at Kiddush at home. Because not everybody went to shul.
For the family.
That's right. Exactly. They didn't hear Vaychu. Right, well, correct. So there's also the Madrash, but the people at home didn't necessarily daven, let's say, but yes, no matter what we say Vayachulu at home, but you understand that the roots of it come from the fact that everybody needed to hear Vayachulu on Friday nights. At some point, you need to hear Vayachulu, and that's why on Friday night when we make Kiddush in shul, why instead of Vayachulu in the Kiddush in shul? Just said it. You said it 5 minutes ago before Baruch Mein Sheva. You said Vayachulu. Therefore, you just when I make Kiddush on Friday night here in the shul, I just start with Baruch Gofen. There's no reason to say Vayachulu again. Everyone who's in the room heard Vayachulu already at that point. Okay. Okay. I lost my spot again. Okay, V'haminag lomar she'osel shebekiddush me'umad af im amar b'meis haknesses. The minhag is to say it anyways at Kiddush, standing at Kiddush on Friday night, even if you said it in shul. And I believe that is undoubtedly the minhag of everybody is to say Vayachulu at the beginning of Kiddush at home. And we shouldn't change that minhag. Okay, so now let's take a look at time is it? 8:30. Okay, so let's read it for a few more minutes. Sif Ches up on top. He says in the Shulchan Aruch writes, the Omer Shliach Tzibur Bracha Achas Me'ein Sheva Ve'ein Hayachid Omer Osa. So the Shliach Tzibur is supposed to say a bracha, one bracha that is of the Me'ein Sheva means that it includes the topic of all 7 brachos. It's Me'ein Sheva. We have a bracha that's also called bracha Me'ein Shalosh, by the way, just to give you a context of the name here. And when you say, most people end up calling it Al HaMichya. The real pure halachists don't like this. Because why? Sometimes it's not Al HaMichya. Sometimes you have to say Al HaGefen, right? Or you have to say Al Ha'etz, because you had a date or a fig. The reality is, it's really called a bracha achas me'ein shalosh. That's how the Mishnah refers to it. You know, the Al. Why? Because you make one bracha that encapsulates 3. Which 3? The first 3 of benching. If you ever look at bracha, if you look at al hamichya, it really incorporates the themes and even many of the phrases of the first 3 brachos of the benching of the full birkas hamazon. Same thing here. This bracha is a bracha achas me'ein sheva. It's one bracha that includes all 7 parts, all 7 themes of the brachos of the Amida on Friday night. And that's exactly why it's called Me'ein Sheva, okay? Which is nicknamed Magen Avos. But no, that in the halachic literature, they won't call it Magen Avos, at least the original, halachic literature, they're called Me'ein Sheva, okay? It's a bracha achas Me'ein Sheva. And the individual does not say so. Ve'ein hayachid omeros. Only the shaliach tzibur. Now, you're going to be like, wait a minute. But every week, I always say it. Because I do say part of it, right?
That's in lieu of the Chazara.
What was that?
That's really in lieu of the Chazara.
But there's no Chazara on Friday.
That's correct.
Right.
There's no Chazara, but he hits the high points there.
100%. But why does the Yachid say only part of it? I should say the whole thing. So take a look here at the Ramah. The Ramah writes, just continuing in the right where we left off. Okay. If an individual wants to be strict upon himself, stringent upon himself, don't say the opening and don't say the end bracha. So just know that we're all very frum every Friday night. We're machmir. So we say the middle part, no, at the beginning, not the end. We don't say that, Hashem, Baruch Hashem, because perhaps it's a bracha levatala. And so we say the middle part. That's became the minhag amongst Ashkenazim and Ad Hayom Hazeh. That's the minhag. Any Ashkenazi, I don't know what they do, by the way. Sfaradim. BJ is not here for me to reference or Shlomo, but Ashkenazim, this is undoubtedly our minhag. Okay, take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah now. Why do we have this in the first place? We know there's no chazaras hashatz on a Friday night or on any night. Marv doesn't require a chazaras hashatz because the whole thing is a tefillas reshus anyways. So why do we do this? Who masha hashaliach tzibur omer achar tefillah baruch Hashem Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avosseinu v'chulei konei shamayim va'aretz. First of all, he's giving us context about what is the text we're talking about here. It's this whole thing about, konei shamayim va'aretz, okay. V'niskina mishum sakanas mazikim. It was instituted out of the danger of the Mazikin. I'm going to translate literally here. What's a mazik? Yeah, this may have been also. Yeah, but they also were in the beginning of Brachos talks about they were mazikim, sort of shadim. They were also they were damagers. Shadim are also these the demons are also damagers. And where were they located? Excuse me. Shabbat Knesset Shalahem Hayu Basfatem. Their shuls were out in the fields. They were not in this. They would gather together in some I don't know shack. I don't know exactly what it looked like. But their shuls were out in the fields, and then they would walk back to their places of where they lived. Yeah.
For some reason, they would go out in the field, say the truth. That was a big one.
To bring in Shabbos in the field.
Yeah.
But that was for being mekabel the Shabbos, right? Accepting Shabbos. That's why we turn around at the end of the Chadodi and we welcome the Shabbos. The idea was actually that people actually used to go outside to the fields and welcome in Shabbos as the sun was setting over the horizon. But you didn't have to daven Marav at that point. You could daven Marav. Go, okay, good. Welcome Shabbos, and then you could then walk and daven Marav somewhere, back in the shul. But their minhag was that they would. It wasn't that they only Friday night were davening in the fields. The shul was out in the fields. I don't know why this was the case. By the way, that would be an interesting historical.
Like Friday night was different because they had basic Knesset and all these little shtetman.
But they're saying the base Knesset was out in the field. It was not like where the people gathered.
The village?
No, for some it was not. I mean, I'm sure in many European towns, and then later it was time. You go back more, like Bismana Talmud, Correct. Now I'll tell you why though. Ready? He says that this because that way they didn't want the bad guys out there walking out. We do this, by the way, we do this every night. I'll talk about it in a moment. Shabbat Knesset Shalahem Hayu Basfatem. Their shuls were out in the fields. But if Amin b'nei Adam ve'achim lavo l'beis Knesset, an unheard of thing. Sometimes people came late to shul. V'yisharu yechidim b'beis Knesset Basfatem, and they were behind. And they were still saying the Amidah, and everyone else was done. They finished Aleinu. They sang Yigdal, and they went home. And then Yankel, the Jew, he's stuck. He has to walk home by himself, and it's very dangerous to walk home at night from the fields. There are listim, there are bad guys. Maybe the shadim too. Maybe they also had the demons to worry about. But they were worried that bad things would happen to them. They instituted this bracha so that while the shliach tzibur was saying it, going over the whole bracha, the latecomers will finish their Shemona Esrei and they'll be done. The gam ha'idna lo zazal takanam imkoman. They're like today, come on. I mean, like the shul, we're in the middle of the community or whatever. Like, what are we worried about? It's not the fields. Nonetheless, the takana was instituted, and we don't move from this minhag. This minhag stays.
Excuse me.
Nobody comes late.
Nobody comes late today, by the way. No one comes late, and so therefore there's no reason to say it, but we still do it. Yeah, go ahead, say it.
Rav, I read somewhere, and I can't cite the source, but if you're in shul and there's one guy that's taking his time finishing up davening, and you're the only other person there, you're not supposed to leave until he's ready to leave. So at least two people leave together.
That is correct. That is from Rabbeinu Tam, and I believe it is cited in the Shulchan Aruch, Yerama. So Shulchan Aruch that you're not supposed to if there's someone who's still davening and they're going to be left behind, you shouldn't walk out of shul and leave them as the last person. If they're just tarrying because they're talking or whatever, they're on their cell phone, a different story. Then they've clearly made a proactive choice to walk home by themselves. But for them to be left alone is something we did that was not done. Correct. The question, there's a whole halachic literature and other. There's a halachic discussion of does the halacha apply today? Most of us drive by, a parking lot in our shuls. Are you really concerned that it's some sakana? you should know that your rabbi is pretty makir on that. I was not me, or Morrison. He's makir about that halacha that Simi just mentioned. There have been times that maybe I came late to Marv or something like that, and I was still davening, and I don't know, one time he waited for me. I don't know. I was like, "What is great?" So he's done that, or he's done that for other people too. So just know that it's not a halacha that's just Simeon just pulled out of thin air. What was that? We're not Poland anymore, right? But whatever. Yeah. So we also have one other thing that's very similar to this on every Marv. What do we have? Baruch Hashem Elam Amen. That was instituted also in order to cause the delays of the people coming late, didn't walk home by themselves. There's a whole discussion. Some people actually said that, and they walked home and they davened Shema Esrei by themselves later at night because they didn't want to walk home when it was dark. But this idea of the danger of walking home is featured in other halachos as well. And here's another example. That's why we do this on Friday night. Bracha Mein Sheva is for the danger of the people walking home late at night by themselves, so that they came late to shul. That's the origin story of that halacha. Now, what about the whole thing about the Kehila says the part of the middle, V'lo chasima, Chaf Aleph, the Hainu shemaschil magen avos, ad zecher l'maseh bereshis, bilvad. That's the only part they say. They say from magen avos to maseh bereshis. Then it's Elokeinu Elokeinu. Say that's the core bracha that we say, by the way, in the Shemona Esrei of every other, right? That's the chasima. The psicha is Baruch Atah Hashem Ad Konei Shamayim V'Aretz. That's like the opening sentence, and so we, the Kehila, repeat Magen Avos that's where we start from Magen Avos Ad Zeichel Maseh Bereshis Chav Beis below psicha v'chasima. We don't have an opening or a closing. In terms of what we repeat. Why? The takana is that the shliach tzibur. That's how they set it up. The shliach tzibur should make this bracha. Okay, nira pashut mashamashan ogim ezim makom shliach tzibur omer bekol ram ad konei shamayim v'aretz. V'achar kach omer belachash lo yafel hayin osim. Ela achash tesimu hakal yaschilu magen avos bekol ram. And I have seen this in this post-COVID. People got a little lax with this stuff. That because the takana was that the shliach tzibur had to say it. There's some communities that were no hay that the chazan would say it out loud until konei shamayim va'aretz, and everyone would say magen avos, and the chazan would quietly say it along too, is not really correct because the takana was that the shliach tzibur should say the whole thing out loud. And so therefore what he should do is wait for the Kehila to finish the Magen Avos, and then he should say Magen Avos out loud. That the minhag became that the Kehila says, okay, that's the minhag that the Ashkenazim developed, that we say it too. But the Shliach Tzibur has to say it out loud because that was the takana. To get away with saying it quietly, during COVID, there was many Kehilas. I think maybe we did it also that we're trying to make davening shorter, whatever. And so that was one of the cuts, like, okay, everyone, Magen Avos, the Chazan will say it with the Kehila. Really, the Chazan should not say Magen Avos with the Kehila unless he is louder than everybody else. Like unless he's saying Magen Avos at the top of his lungs. But usually that's not the case when that happens. Anyways. Okay, that is Sif Ches. All right, we will stop here. We'll continue with Sif Test next week. Which talks about Yom Tov Shechalios B'Shabbos. What happens when Friday night is Yom Tov, and not in terms of Vayachulu. You should say Vayachulu, of course you should, because you didn't say it in the Amida. But now the question is, what do I do do I say Bracha La'achas Mein Sheva? Do I say this? And if I say it, should I mention Yom Tov in the Bracha Achas Mein Sheva? Should I have some mention in there? Because if it's supposed to encapsulate the 7 brachos of the Amida, well, don't you know that Amida I just said, it mentioned Shabbos, but it also mentioned Yom Tov. So we're going to talk about this question about Bracha Achas Mein Sheva on a Friday night that is Yom Tov. Kabbalat Shabbat is it's correct. It's truncated. It's Bezbar Shir, and Shem Malach. Correct. Yeah. So we'll see how his gets affected by things. Yes, Timmy, go ahead. I see you have a question.
Yeah, well, it's not a question, Rob. I want to say something to you. I find very interesting.
Yeah.
It's always nice to know when a particular chacham lived and in what environment he lived. And one day I was in the state of New Jersey representing somebody that owned a nursing home, and he had a trouble with something involving the roof, and I had to meet the roofer and the insurance company up on the roof. So I go up on the roof, and the roofer shows up, and he's a young man wearing a yarmulke, tzitz is flapping out. And we were talking after the meeting, and I like to talk halacha and limud with him. And here